Let's start with Syria. How dire is the food shortage on the ground there as this bitter civil war continues?
Well, the challenge is we are now operating in a conflict that's been ongoing for almost 3 years, where WFP is operating in all 14 governments. We're serving in the opposition-held area, the regime-held areas. But in those besieged areas, the areas where the conflict is ongoing every day, some of those communities we haven't had the ability to provide food assistance or, as the UN, any of the water or other non-food assistance that is required for, in some pockets, for 12 to 18 months.
How difficult, how challenging is it to physically get food to the areas that need it?
Well, we are always in armored vehicles. Our primary partner, the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, has lost over 50 members of their volunteer corps to sniper shootings in and around Syria. And the reality is it's a war zone where people are the victims of that war zone who can't receive what they need to live. And those of us who are humanitarian responders are doing the work on an everyday basis.
Let's come to our own region, to the still the devastating effects of Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. It's quite easy for us in the media and people generally to move on after cataclysmic events like this, but still the situation on the ground there is pretty desperate too. What is the food situation in those areas of the Philippines?
Well, just as in any kind of crisis, the poorest, the most vulnerable were the hardest hit in the Philippines. Those are the people who continue to require our assistance and will require our assistance into the foreseeable future. We, in many cases, started off providing them with food because that was what they needed, because there was no food available. Now, as markets begin to open, you still have the poorest people who've lost all their livelihoods, and so they can't access that food. So in many cases, we're providing vouchers, what we call food for work or vouchers for work, where people are working to rebuild their lives and we're providing them with the vouchers that they need to go into the market to buy their food. And we'll do that work for as long as we're required and as long as it's necessary.
Ertharin, your organisation, of course, does incredibly important work in partnership often with governments around the world. On that front, how important do you believe it is for governments everywhere to either maintain or, if they can, increase their foreign aid commitments?
Well, WFP is 100% voluntarily funded, and 95% of that funding comes from governments around the world. We've had a strong partnership with the Australian government for over 50 years. It's because of the generosity of the people of Australia that we've been able to respond in places like Syria, and particularly in places like the Philippines, where Australia was our first government to step up.